All right, I'm going to talk about industry associations as a source of information. I'm going to give you a personal example of mine. Many years ago, I was helping this Canadian company up in North York. This company was founded by some immigrants from Israel, and they were in software development. And they wanted to do some business in Japan, and I had a lot of experience in Japan. And there's a couple ways I could have gone about this. It would have been very time-consuming. I could have written to the Canadian Embassy and asked for some help on exporting to Japan. I could have looked up on a list of individual Japanese companies and wrote them a Dear Mr. Watanabe letter and hoped that I could get some information. But I decided to network through industry associations. Now, one of the things you need to understand about industry associations is they serve their members. What that means is the purpose of their existence is to do things to help the members, like events, newsletters that are informative, information about tariffs and subsidies that are causing challenges, target market segment information, country reports, all kinds of things that people running a business would need to know. And it's also a great way of networking and developing opportunities for exporting. So what I did was, I found out there's something called the Japanese Software Developers Association. Now this particular company wanted to export this software from Canada that was related to the automotive manufacturing business. So there's also the Japanese Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association as well, or a similar word to that. So what I did was, I contacted this association in Japanese, and I wrote to them saying, here's this Canadian company doing this particular activity, and they'd be interested in a story in the newsletter about their activity because they're looking for a Japanese partner. And could you please put this in the next newsletter? And I was not surprised when they agreed to that. Now think about it for a second. If I had individually written a letter to each one of these Japanese companies as a complete stranger, asking for their favor of reading the enclosed material, etc., and I'm going to come to Tokyo, could you please meet with me? They may or may not be interested. But if I take the angle of getting a story about the company in the newsletter, and they read that newsletter, there's a couple things they're going to be thinking about, because here's the process in the background. If they read the Industry Association newsletter, the first thing they're going to say to themselves is, well, this company's not a stranger. Somebody at the head office of this Tokyo Association has met these people or had contact with them and vetted them, meaning made some opinion as to whether they're legit or not. So if we do make contact with them, we know the first stage of their validity or credibility has already been established. But don't worry about that, we'll just keep going. So the reason for doing that strategy was to be able to make me have some kind of introduction above and beyond my own sort of independent contact. Then the next thing I did was contact these people who made some reply and say, I'm going to be in Tokyo on, say, third week in August, and I'd like to meet with you. So that was the way I used an industry association. Now, in part, what I did at the same time was contact the local Canadian Embassy in Tokyo and tell them about my contacts with the industry association. You know the reason why? Because somebody at the embassy writes a report every month that's sent back to Ottawa on their contacts with Japanese companies that are potential business partners for Canadians. And if they can cite these examples that I just researched, then that's a good thing. So I've got a friend now on the embassy side who's been able to write something in a report because I was able to drag up the names of these companies. So that was the second part, was using the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo to then say, well, now I'm going to potentially meet these 4 companies, could you tell me something about them? And they'll write me back and say, yeah, we know this company because they were featured in a local newspaper article about some business they had in Brazil, so they're already interested in doing business overseas, etc., etc. The other reason why I mentioned industry associations for students is it's a great way of shopping your resume around, right? If you individually contact companies, you're going to get the typical FOD letter, right? The F off and die letter. But if you go to an industry association's event, like a seminar or a conference or something like that, and not too many students do this, to industry association sector events. And you go to the individual companies that have a booth there and you meet them and have some chance to talk. You can get the names of specific people in the company at the VP or senior VP level to then follow up and write to, which is a lot better than independently just writing to, dear HR department or so on. The other thing about industry associations is they often have newsletters and events that students can go to for free. And sometimes the newsletters are even on the website. You don't even have to get them mailed to you. but they will welcome students, especially those that speak other languages where the countries are involved in the industry associations, region of activity. So that's my little tip on how to use industry associations.